So let's talk about creating this KRA. What makes a great KRA? What are the components in it?
Yep, really simple. We've tried to make the KRA creation as simple as possible. And I think that's because most of us, when we're drafting something like this, tend to use $10 words and stuff like use language we never do in our day to day, but it somehow sounds impressive, and the team member that we're working with is going to be more impressed that
Like some resume on LinkedIn where we're saying, "Oh, we leveraged strategies."
Yeah. And nobody actually does that day to day. So we've tried to make KRAs be really what we call cookies on the bottom shelf, and is really as straightforward and simple as possible. So almost every KRA I've done can fit on one page. And so really simply, if you were to say, like, I've got a blank sheet of paper here, how do I create a KRA? All I would do is, literally put their name, title, effective date at the top, just who this is for, what their job is. Maybe a 2 to 3 sentence description, just a summary of overall a high-level description of their job. Clean, simple, easy, but just common language. What is the job all about? And then bullet point 3 to 5 things that are the most important things they need to do in that job. That's really it. So bullet points, really it's like a 1-sentence bullet point with maybe a little bit of descriptor on each, maybe, but you can easily fit that on a page, right? So when I create a KRA, it doesn't take for, whether it's a new team member or it's updating an existing team members, or there's just a team member who doesn't have one and we missed it and we need to create one for them, which is more common than you would think. It really should be a 20 to 30 minute exercise for you, the leader, at most, right? So when you distill it down to something that simple, it really shouldn't take too much more time than that. So that's all it is. It's really that straightforward from like a formatting standpoint. And the funny thing is, as you write that out, a lot of it will kind of feel like, well, duh, this is the stuff that I already knew that they should be doing. But that's not the point. You sure feel that way. That's great. It's not about you feeling that way. It's about them. Do they know all the stuff that you just put down on that piece of paper? And usually, in my experience, the answer is no. And that's usually where all the frustration and anger and just, how do they not know what their job is type feelings come from, is that you have a really clear understanding of what their job is, but they don't. First step, just simply putting that on paper.
Yeah, and that clarity is up to the leader to put those expected outcomes in the KRA so the team member knows, here's what my role is. Here's what I need to be doing to win in this role.
That's right.
So once we've got this KRA, we've got the bullets there, how do we actually put this into action? What role does that team member play in putting this into action?
Yep, great question. The answer is not take that sheet of paper and then hand it to them and say, go do this.
Here's your marching orders, go.
No, even if you could do that, take a step back and think, are they really going to be bought in if I just hand them this and say, go do these things? I've found a really effective practice when you're talking about how do I put this into action and actually have this team member do these things day to day. A great practice is, so you draft it. You should do that first. Then kind of set it mentally or physically, set it aside and have a conversation with them and say, hey, I'd like to align with you on your KRA. I've got a really simple format here, and what I'd like you to do is to take a draft at what you think your KRA is, right? So you've already got the answer. You've already, you could tell them right now, but don't. Get them to fill out their own KRA and then compare notes, right? And every now and then somebody brings something to the table that is one of those like, oh, that makes so much sense type aha moments for me. But you do that for a few reasons. You bring them into the conversation for a few reasons. One, you want this to be a conversation. Like I said, you don't want to just hand them a document and say, just do this. Getting them to do a version and you do a version and us talk about it creates the conversation, but it also creates buy-in. And this is really the most important point here. People are always going to be more bought into something that they have a chance to speak into. And if you just hand them a document and say, go do this, they haven't spoken into anything. If they come up with something that's exactly the same as what you've drafted, you get to say, great, you nailed it. Great job. I think you did this spot on. This is the job. keep going. Usually, though, there's probably about an 80% overlap between the two documents, and that 20% is where the gold is. So talk it out with the team member, talk through some stuff that you have on your document that's not on theirs. And usually as I have those conversations, it's a surprise to them. I'll never forget the time that I was probably the most convicted by this. I had a project manager on our team. His name was Brad. And Brad did a lot of projects. I mean, project managers typically, most of us know what they do in general. You know, there's a lot of coordinating the work that's being done as we're driving towards a deadline or launch or, you know, whatever the type of project is. But one of the things that I expected Brad to do was actually help manage the client, provide some level of updates on the project, status updates on here's where we are, here's what's coming next. And I had just assumed that Brad had just gotten that memo. Brad did not get that memo. And that's 100% on me. Let me say that up front. That is 100% on me. When we walked through the KRA, I was talking through account management as part of his KRA. And he was like, no, that's your job. And see, therein, we got to have a conversation we should have had when he started, but a conversation that we actually had about 6 months later, right? And I talked through the importance of him and the client keeping a regular line of communication and how important they needed to see from him, not from me, the status updates of the project in the trenches. And if they had questions, go to him, right? All of that stuff we talked about. And from then on, he was doing it and doing it extremely well. But it was just a simple, I mean, he just didn't expect it of himself because I never clarified, hey, I'd like you to do this part, you know, this bullet point on the job description. So those things you will bump into, and you may feel shame. You may feel, how did I not have this conversation sooner? Don't dwell on that stuff. Just think about it as I'm actually surfacing it for the first time. And it could have taken years to actually get around to this, but we're doing it now, which is great. Now let's move forward together.